Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now let's begin our journey into the unknown. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my bedside clock, wondering if the ringing was part of another sleepless night, or reality crashing into my insomnia. 15 years as a forensic psychologist had taught me that urgent calls in the dead of night meant one thing. Someone dangerous needed evaluation, and they needed it fast. Dr. Leopold, this is Captain Alana Skinner, Department of Defense. I apologize for the hour, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. I sat up, instantly alert. Military liaisons didn't call civilian psychologists unless something had gone seriously wrong. What kind of situation, Captain? ADX Florence. We need you there by noon today. Pack for extended stay. ADX Florence. The Alcatraz of the Rockies. America's most secure federal prison, where they kept the worst of the worst. Terrorists, spies, serial killers, the kind of people who made other maximum security inmates look like petty thieves. I'd consulted there twice before, but never with this level of urgency. Who am I evaluating? A pause. Static crackled through the line. Staff Sergeant Hugh Doherty, Army Rangers, Medal of Honor recipient. That stopped me cold. A decorated veteran? What's he doing in Supermax? That's what we need you to determine. Doctor, Doherty was arrested 6 months ago for a series of ritualistic murders across 3 states. 7 victims, all killed with military precision. But here's the problem. Doherty claims he was following orders. Orders from someone who doesn't exist in any military database. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar weight of a complex case settling on my shoulders. Delusional episodes? PTSD? That's what we thought initially. But Doherty has been cooperative. Too cooperative. He's provided details about classified operations that only a handful of people should know. Details that check out. We need to know if he's compromised, if someone's been feeding him information. Or if what, Captain? Another pause, longer this time. Or if there's something else entirely going on here. 4 hours later, I was driving through the Colorado plains toward the stark concrete fortress that housed America's most dangerous criminals. The Rocky Mountains loomed in the distance, their snow-capped peaks gleaming under the harsh morning sun. ADX Florence sat like a scar on the landscape, all concrete and razor wire, designed to make visitors feel unwelcome long before they reached the gates. Warden Ian Sullivan met me at the main entrance. A thick-set man with gray hair and tired eyes, Sullivan had the look of someone who'd seen too much human evil and learned to compartmentalize it into neat, manageable files. Dr. Leopold, glad you could make it on short notice. His handshake was firm, professional. I should warn you up front, Doherty isn't like our usual residents. He's been different since his arrival. Different how? Sullivan led me through a series of security checkpoints, each more restrictive than the last. Metal detectors, biometric scanners, armed guards who watched our every move with practiced suspicion. He doesn't sleep, doesn't eat much, spends most of his time sitting perfectly still, staring at the wall. But when he does speak, Sullivan shook his head. You'll see for yourself. We descended into the special housing unit, the most isolated section of an already isolated prison. The hallway stretched ahead of us, lined with solid steel doors marked only by numbers. No windows, no natural light, just fluorescent bulbs casting everything in harsh, clinical white. Doherty's in cell 66, Sullivan said, stopping before an unremarkable door. We've had to move him twice. Other inmates were reporting disturbances. Strange sounds coming from his cell at night. Guards have reported feeling nauseous when they walk this corridor. I frowned. Psychological manipulation? Some kind of warfare tactic? Maybe. Or maybe something else. Sullivan's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Dr. Leopold, I've run this place for 12 years. I've housed terrorists who've killed hundreds. Serial killers who've tortured children, cartel leaders who've ordered massacres, None of them have ever made me feel the way Doherty does. Which is? Sullivan met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never expected to see in a maximum security warden. Fear. Like I'm being watched. Constantly. Even when he's locked in that cell. Even when I'm at home with my family 50 miles away. I feel those eyes on me. The interview room was a sterile box. Concrete walls, metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. A single camera mounted in the corner, red light blinking steadily. I'd conducted hundreds of interviews in rooms just like this one, but something felt different here. The air seemed thicker, more oppressive, as if the room itself was holding its breath. When they brought Doherty in, my first thought was how normal he looked. Medium height, sandy brown hair, clean-shaven face with intelligent brown eyes. If I'd passed him on the street, I might have pegged him for a college professor or accountant. The only hint of his military background was his posture. Straight spine, measured movements, eyes that took in every detail of the room within seconds. The guards secured his restraints to the table and left us alone. Doherty sat quietly, hands folded, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Staff Sergeant Doherty," I began, opening my notebook. "I'm Dr. Sean Leopold. I'm here to conduct a psychological evaluation." He smiled then, not the practiced smile of someone trying to manipulate, but something genuine and deeply unsettling. "I know who you are, Doctor. I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me specifically?" "Oh yes. You're exactly what we need." Doherty leaned forward slightly, and I caught a strange scent. Ozone, like the air before a thunderstorm. "Tell me, Dr. Leopold, do you believe in destiny?" I kept my expression neutral, professional. "I believe in observable behavior and measurable psychological phenomena. Why don't we start with your military service? I understand you served 3 tours in Afghanistan." Doherty's smile widened. 3 tours. 47 confirmed kills. Silver Star, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with V device. And the Medal of Honor, of course. Quite a collection for a farm boy from Kentucky. "What earned you the Medal of Honor?" For the first time, Doherty's expression shifted. Something dark and hungry flickered behind his eyes. "Operation Neptune Spear, May 2nd, 2011. I was part of the team that took down Osama bin Laden." I made a note, though I already knew this from his file. "That's a significant operation. What was your specific role?" "Interrogation specialist. See, the official story says we found bin Laden and eliminated him immediately. But that's not quite true, Doctor. We had him alive for almost 3 hours before the kill order came through." Doherty's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 hours of conversation, just him and me. And my friend, of course. "Your friend?" The voice. "The one who's been with me since I was 7 years old, playing by Rough Creek in Kentucky. The one who taught me how to make people tell the truth." I set down my pen, studying Doherty's face for signs of delusion or manipulation. His eyes remained clear, focused. No obvious signs of psychosis. "Tell me about this voice, Sergeant." Doherty laughed, a sound that seemed to echo longer than it should in the small room. "It's not just a voice, Doctor. It's so much more than that. It's been guiding humanity for thousands of years, selecting special individuals to help shape history. Warriors, leaders, visionaries, all touched by its influence. And you believe you're one of these special individuals?" "I know I am. Just as I know you could be too, if you're willing to listen." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I glanced at the camera in the corner and noticed something that made my breath catch. The red recording light was flickering erratically, casting strange shadows on the walls. Doherty followed my gaze and chuckled. "Technology doesn't work quite right around me anymore, Doctor. Not since I fully embraced what I am, what I could help you become." "What happened during those 3 hours with bin Laden?" Doherty's eyes took on a distant quality, as if he was reliving the memory. "My friend showed me how to reach into his mind, to pull out secrets he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten them himself. Bank accounts, sleeper cells, plans for attacks that would have killed thousands, information that the CIA spent years trying to extract through conventional means. How? The same way it taught me to hunt those 7 people after I came home. the same way it could teach you to become the most successful forensic psychologist in the world. Doherty reached into his pocket, and I tensed, but the guards had searched him thoroughly. He pulled out something small and placed it on the table between us. It was a stone, no bigger than a marble, deep red like crystallized blood, with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Just looking at it made me feel dizzy, nauseous. This is how it all began, Doctor. I found this little beauty when I was 7, fishing in Rough Creek. The moment I touched it, everything changed. Suddenly I could see things, understand things that other people couldn't. By the time I enlisted, I was already something more than human. The stone seemed to draw my gaze, and I found it difficult to look away. Doherty, I need you to put that away. Why? Afraid of what you might learn? Of what you might become? Doherty's voice was changing subtly, taking on harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat. I can see it in you, Dr. Leopold, the ambition, the desire to understand the criminal mind so completely that you become legendary in your field. This could give you that, access to thoughts, memories, the darkest secrets that your subjects try to hide. Despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I found myself leaning forward. The stone pulsed brighter, and I swear I could hear something. A whisper just below the threshold of hearing, speaking words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Take it, Doherty urged. Just hold it for a moment. What could it hurt? You're a man of science, Doctor. Surely you're curious about phenomena that can't be easily explained. The rational part of my mind, the part trained in scientific methodology and peer review, knew this was ridiculous. Magical stones belonged in fantasy novels, not federal prisons. But the ambiguous part, the part that had always wondered if there were forces in the universe beyond current understanding, reached out almost without conscious thought. My fingers had just brushed the stone's surface when every light in the room went out simultaneously. The darkness that engulfed the interview room wasn't just an absence of light. It was something alive, breathing, pressing against my skin with the weight of centuries. In that endless black void, I could hear Doherty's laughter echoing from everywhere and nowhere, as if the sound itself had become untethered from the laws of physics. Emergency lighting should have kicked in within seconds. Backup generators should have hummed to life. But the room remained trapped in absolute darkness, and I realized with growing terror that my hand was still touching the crimson stone. The moment I tried to pull away, searing pain shot through my arm, as if the stone had fused with my flesh. "Don't fight it, Doctor," Doherty's voice whispered, though I couldn't tell if he was speaking aloud or directly into my mind. The first touch is always the most intense, like diving into an ocean of pure consciousness. I tried to speak, to call for help, but my voice caught in my throat. The stone pulsed beneath my fingertips, each beat sending waves of alien sensation through my nervous system. Images flashed behind my closed eyes, visions that couldn't possibly be real, yet felt more vivid than my own memories. I saw Doherty as a child, 7 years old, fishing alone by Rough Creek on a sweltering Kentucky summer day. The water ran crystal clear over smooth limestone, and dragonflies danced above the surface in lazy spirals. Young Hugh had been trying to catch minnows with his bare hands when something caught his eye. A flash of deep red nestled between two riverstones. "I thought it was just a pretty rock," Doherty's voice narrated as the vision unfolded before me. "Maybe a piece of red jasper or carnelian. I'd found similar stones before, but none that seemed to glow from within." The moment the boy's fingers closed around the stone, everything changed. The peaceful creek scene shattered, replaced by something far older and infinitely more terrifying. I watched in horrified fascination as cosmic awareness flooded the child's mind, knowledge of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humanity took its first breath, of entities that existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on consciousness itself. "That's when I first heard its voice," Doherty continued, his tone taking on an almost reverent quality. "Ancient beyond measure, patient as stone, hungry as the void between stars. It told me its name in a language that predates human speech, but you can call it the Whisperer in red." The visions shifted, showing me fragments of Doherty's life after that fateful day. I saw him at age 12, using his newfound abilities to manipulate his middle school principal into covering up a violent incident. At 16, convincing a police officer to forget about a hit-and-run accident. At 18, enlisting in the army with forged documents and supernatural charisma that made every recruiter see exactly what they wanted to see. The entity taught me patience, Daugherty explained. It had waited millennia for the right moment, the right vessel. I was just the latest in a long line of chosen servants, but I was special. I had the perfect combination of intelligence, ambition, and moral flexibility. Most importantly, I was going to war. The lights flickered back on suddenly, causing me to squint against the harsh fluorescent glare. My hand jerked away from the stone, which now sat innocuously on the metal table between us. Daugherty watched me with amused satisfaction, as if he'd just shown me his favorite magic trick. "The cameras will show nothing unusual," he said casually, gesturing toward the corner. A brief power fluctuation, lasting perhaps 30 seconds. The guards outside experienced a momentary dizzy spell, but will dismiss it as fatigue. Technology bends around the stone's influence, Doctor. Reality itself becomes malleable. I stared at my hand, expecting to see some mark or burn from my contact with the stone, but my skin appeared completely normal. Yet I could still feel an echo of that alien consciousness, a whisper at the edge of my thoughts that hadn't been there before. "What did you do to me?" I demanded, surprised by how hoarse my voice sounded. Daugherty leaned back in his chair, the restraints around his wrist seeming suddenly loose. "I opened a door, Dr. Leopold. Just a crack, mind you. Enough for you to glimpse what lies beyond, but not enough to drive you immediately insane. The Whisperer is selective about its full revelations." "This is impossible," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they rang hollow. Scientific training warred with the evidence of my senses, but the visions I'd experienced felt more real than the sterile interview room around us. "Is it?" Daugherty smiled. "You study the human mind, Doctor. You know how little we actually understand about consciousness, about the true nature of reality. What if I told you that everything you've dedicated your life to studying, criminal psychology, behavioral analysis, the darkest corners of human nature, what if all of it was just the surface of something far deeper and more profound?" Despite my better judgment, I found myself leaning forward. "Go on." The Whisperer feeds on chaos, on the breakdown of order and sanity. War provides the perfect feast. Thousands of minds pushed beyond their breaking point, moral certainties crumbling under the weight of violence and survival. My 3 tours in Afghanistan weren't just military service, Dr. Leopold. They were a buffet of human suffering, and I was the maitre d'. Daugherty's eyes took on that distant quality again, as if he was seeing through time itself. My first confirmed kill was a Taliban fighter, maybe 19 years old, hiding in a bombed-out building in Kandahar. Standard engagement, nothing unusual about it. But when I squeezed the trigger, the Whisperer showed me something extraordinary. In the split second between the bullet leaving my rifle and finding its target, I could see into the boy's mind. His entire life flashed before me. His childhood in a remote village, his radicalization, his fears and hopes and dreams. And when he died, I felt a part of his consciousness flow into me. I tried to maintain my professional composure, but something cold was crawling up my spine. That's not possible. Isn't it? You've interviewed serial killers who claim to collect their victims' memories. Mass murderers who describe feeling their victims' final moments. What if they weren't just delusional? What if some of them had touched something similar to this? He gestured toward the stone. 47 confirmed kills over 3 tours, Daugherty continued. Each one taught me something new about human nature, about the fragile line between civilization and savagery. But the real education came during interrogations. The Whisperer showed me how to slip into a prisoner's mind, how to find the pressure points that would make them break. I became the most effective interrogator in my unit, with a success rate that made my commanding officers nervous. "That's when they selected you for Operation Neptune Spear," I said, pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. "May the 2nd, 2011, Daugherty nodded. "The raid on the compound in Abbottabad. The official story says we found bin Laden and eliminated him within minutes, but that's not quite accurate." See, there was debate among the team leaders about whether to take him alive for interrogation. The intelligence value of capturing him intact versus the satisfaction of immediate termination. Doherty paused, his expression growing darker. They gave me 3 hours with him before the kill order came through. 3 hours to extract every scrap of information from the most wanted man on Earth, and I succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. How? I let the Whisperer loose, Doherty said simply. For the first time since childhood, I gave it complete control. The entity flowed through me, into bin Laden's mind, and pulled out secrets that he'd buried so deep even he'd forgotten them. Bank account numbers, sleeper cell locations, planned attacks that would have killed thousands. Information that the CIA had been trying to extract for a decade through conventional means. The stone on the table pulsed with a faint inner light, as if responding to Doherty's words. I found my gaze drawn to it again, and with each heartbeat, it seemed to grow more compelling. But the real revelation came during those final moments, Doherty continued. As bin Laden was dying, the Whisperer showed me something that changed everything. You see, Doctor, he wasn't the first person of power to be touched by entities like mine. Throughout history, there have been others. Leaders, visionaries, madmen, all guided by forces beyond human comprehension. Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, even some American presidents. The course of human civilization has been shaped by cosmic influences that most people couldn't even imagine. You're talking about a conspiracy theory, I said weakly. But even as I spoke, part of me was beginning to believe. Am I? Think about it logically, Dr. Leopold. How else do you explain the seemingly random nature of historical events? The rise and fall of empires, the sudden emergence of charismatic leaders, the inexplicable decisions that shape the fate of nations. What if it's not random at all? What if there are entities guiding human development, using us as pawns in some cosmic game? The implications of what he was suggesting hit me with the force of physical blow. And you're saying this Whisperer chose you? Not just chose me, groomed me. Every kill in Afghanistan, every successful interrogation, every moment of violence and chaos, it was all preparation for something larger. The entity has been patient, working through multiple hosts over centuries, slowly building towards some ultimate goal. Which is? Doherty's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Access, Doctor. Access to the highest levels of power and influence. Think about what I accomplished in just 3 hours with bin Laden. Imagine what could be achieved with access to presidents, prime ministers, generals, intelligence chiefs. The entity doesn't want to destroy human civilization. It wants to guide it, to shape it into something more useful. And the murders? The 7 victims that landed you here? For the first time, something resembling regret flickered across Doherty's features. Practice, he said quietly. The Whisperer wanted to test its abilities in civilian settings, to see how effectively it could manipulate law enforcement investigations. Each kill was designed to be ritualistic, symbolic, to send a message to those who knew how to read it. The murders weren't random violence, they were recruitment tools. Recruitment for what? For people like you, Dr. Leopold. Brilliant minds, respected professionals, individuals with access to other brilliant minds. The entity has been waiting for someone with your specific qualifications. A forensic psychologist with a sterling reputation and contacts throughout the criminal justice system. The room seemed to grow smaller around us, the walls pressing in as the implications of his words sank in. You're saying this was all planned? That I was specifically targeted? From the moment Captain Skinner made that phone call, Doherty confirmed. The entity has been watching you for months, studying your work, your ambitions, your psychological profile. It knew exactly how to present this opportunity to make it irresistible to someone with your background. That's impossible. The murders happened months before I was called in. Time isn't as linear as most people believe, Doctor. The Whisperer exists partially outside our normal temporal framework. It can see probabilities, potential futures, the ripple effects of actions taken today. Your involvement in this case was never in doubt. I looked down at my hands, trying to process everything I'd heard. The rational part of my mind was screaming that this was all elaborate delusion, the fantasy of a disturbed killer trying to manipulate me. But the visions I'd experienced when touching the stone felt more real than my own memories. And somewhere in the back of my consciousness, I could still hear that alien whisper, promising knowledge and power beyond imagination. "What does it want from me?" I asked, the words coming out in barely a whisper. "Partnership," Doherty said. "You have something the entity needs: credibility, access, the ability to move freely through corridors of power without raising suspicion. In return, it offers something you've always wanted: the ability to understand criminal psychology at a level no one has ever achieved before." "I don't understand." "Think about it, Dr. Leopold. What drives your research? What motivates you to spend hours interviewing society's most dangerous individuals? You want to understand what makes them tick, to peer into the darkest corners of human nature and emerge with profound insights. The stone can give you that. It can let you experience memories directly, feel the emotions and motivations that drive criminals to their acts. No more guesswork, no more psychological theories. Pure, unfiltered understanding." The stone pulsed brighter, and I found myself staring at it with growing fascination. The idea was seductive beyond belief. To truly understand criminal behavior from the inside, to experience the thoughts and emotions of killers and psychopaths without becoming one myself. It would revolutionize the field of forensic psychology. "But there's a price," I said, knowing there had to be a catch. "There's always a price," Doherty agreed. "The entity will occasionally require favors. Access to certain individuals, the manipulation of specific investigations, the steering of justice in particular directions. Nothing that would compromise your core ethics, just minor adjustments to ensure the right people end up in the right places at the right times." "And if I refuse?" Doherty's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Then you leave here with nothing but the memory of an impossible story told by a delusional killer. The visions you experienced will fade like dreams. Your career will continue on its current trajectory, successful but unremarkable. You'll spend the next 20 years conducting routine evaluations, writing predictable papers, and wondering what might have been." The stone's pulsing intensified, and I realized that my hand was already moving toward it. Part of me was horrified by my own actions, but a larger part was consumed by curiosity. The promise of unprecedented insight into criminal psychology was too tempting to ignore. "Just one more touch," Doherty encouraged. "Just to see what it feels like to truly understand a killer's mind. What harm could it do?" My fingers hovered inches above the stone's surface. I could feel heat radiating from it, and that alien whisper was growing louder, more insistent. It spoke of knowledge and power, of becoming the most successful forensic psychologist in history, of unlocking secrets that had remained hidden since the dawn of civilization. "Dr. Leopold," Doherty said softly, "do you want to change the world, or do you want to remain just another face in the crowd?" I touched the stone. This time, the visions came in a torrent that threatened to overwhelm my sanity. I saw myself standing before packed auditoriums, delivering lectures that revolutionized criminal psychology. I witnessed interviews with the most notorious killers in history, each session revealing insights that previous experts had missed entirely. I observed my name being carved into the pantheon of legendary forensic psychologists, my techniques taught in universities around the world. But underneath the promise lay something darker. I saw myself manipulating evidence in high-profile cases, steering investigations toward predetermined conclusions. I watched as I used my newfound abilities to influence juries, to ensure that certain criminals walked free while others were convicted of crimes they didn't commit. All in service of some greater plan that I couldn't quite comprehend. When the visions ended, I found myself back in the interview room, but everything had changed. The colors seemed more vivid, the sounds more distinct. I could hear the electrical hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant conversations of guards 3 corridors away, even the steady heartbeat of the man sitting across from me. "Welcome to the next phase of human evolution, Dr. Leopold," Doherty said with genuine warmth. "You're going to accomplish extraordinary things." I stared at the stone, which now appeared dim and lifeless on the metal table, but I could feel its influence flowing through my bloodstream, changing me on a fundamental level. The whisper in my mind was no longer alien. It felt like my own thoughts, my own desires amplified and clarified. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you return to your normal life," Doherty replied. "Complete your evaluation, file your report, collect your fee. But things will start changing quickly. You'll find yourself being offered opportunities you never expected, interviews with criminals you never thought you'd have access to. Your insights will become sharper, your success rate will improve dramatically. Within a year, you'll be the most sought-after forensic psychologist in the country. And the entity will guide you as it has guided me. You'll know when it needs something from you. The requests will seem reasonable at first. Small favors, minor adjustments to testimony, steering certain cases in particular directions. You'll barely notice the incremental compromises, but each one will bring you closer to the entity's ultimate goal. Which is?" Doherty stood up, his restraints somehow having come completely loose. The guards outside showed no signs of noticing or caring. "Access to the highest levels of power, Dr. Leopold. Presidents, Supreme Court justices, intelligence directors, all the people who shape policy and determine the course of nations. And you're going to help the entity reach them." He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at me. "Oh? And doctor? You might want to practice your smile. You're going to need it for all those television interviews you'll be giving." The door opened without anyone touching it, and Doherty walked out into the corridor. I could hear his footsteps echoing down the hallway, but no alarms sounded, no guards called out. It was as if he'd simply become invisible to everyone except me. I sat alone in the interview room for what felt like hours, trying to process what had happened. The rational part of my mind insisted that I'd suffered some kind of psychological break, that the stress of the case had caused me to hallucinate the entire encounter. But the whisper in my consciousness told a different story, and I found myself believing it more with each passing moment. Eventually, the guards returned to escort me out. They seemed confused about Doherty's whereabouts, but not particularly concerned. According to their logs, he was still in his cell, had never left it. The interview had lasted exactly 45 minutes, nothing unusual had occurred, and the recording equipment had functioned perfectly throughout. But when I checked the recordings later, they showed only an empty room with 2 chairs. No sign of Doherty, no evidence of our conversation, nothing to suggest that any of it had been real. Except for the stone. I found it in my briefcase when I returned to my hotel room that evening. It sat nestled between my notebooks and files, pulsing with that familiar inner light. As I stared at it, I realized that my life had fundamentally changed. The entity had made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and now I was bound to its will whether I liked it or not. The whisper in my mind grew stronger, showing me visions of the future. My future. I saw myself becoming the most famous forensic psychologist in the world, conducting interviews that would make history, writing books that would define the field for generations. All I had to do was follow the entity's guidance and occasionally provide it with access to the powerful people I would soon be meeting. It seemed like a reasonable bargain. 2 years later, I stood in the marble foyer of the West Wing, straightening my tie and checking my reflection in the polished surface of a nearby pillar. The man staring back at me bore little resemblance to the skeptical forensic psychologist who had walked into ADX Florence that March morning. Success had changed me in ways both visible and invisible. Expensive tailored suit, confident posture, eyes that seemed to see straight through people's carefully constructed facades. "Dr. Leopold?" A crisp voice interrupted my thoughts. A young aide in a navy blazer approached, clipboard in hand. "The president will see you now." I followed her through corridors lined with portraits of former leaders, each face watching me with what felt like knowing anticipation. The whisper in my mind, so familiar now that it felt like my own inner voice, pulsed with satisfaction. After 24 months of careful orchestration, we had finally reached this moment. The transformation had been exactly as Doherty predicted. Within weeks of returning from ADX Florence, interview requests had begun flooding in. High-profile cases that had baffled other experts suddenly seemed to require my specific expertise. The Riverside Strangler in California, the corporate executive who had murdered his entire board of directors in Chicago, the teenager who had systematically poisoned half his high school. Each case had elevated my reputation to new heights. My insights had been unprecedented, my success rate impossible to explain through conventional psychology. Television producers fought over exclusive interviews. Publishers offered seven-figure book deals. Universities created new positions specifically to recruit me. I had become exactly what the entity promised, the most sought-after criminal psychologist in the world. But with each triumph came subtle compromises. A favorable evaluation here, a strategically omitted detail there, testimony that steered high-profile cases toward predetermined outcomes. The requests had seemed reasonable at first, always framed as serving a greater good. A serial killer needed to walk free because his continued presence would serve some larger purpose. A politician's son required protection from consequences because his family's influence would prove useful later. I told myself I was playing a long game, sacrificing small ethical considerations for transformative insights into human nature. The stone's influence made these rationalizations feel perfectly logical, even noble. After all, what was justice compared to understanding? What were a few manipulated verdicts against revolutionary advances in criminal psychology? The Oval Office door opened, and I found myself face to face with the most powerful person on Earth. President Catherine Hayes looked younger than her 58 years, silver hair perfectly styled, blue eyes sharp with intelligence. She stood behind the resolute desk, extending a hand in greeting. Dr. Leopold, thank you for making time in your busy schedule. I've been following your work since the Pemberton case. Remarkable insights. The pleasure is mine, Madam President, I replied, accepting her handshake. Her grip was firm, confident, but I could sense something underneath, a tension she was working hard to conceal. Please, sit. She gestured toward the couches arranged near the fireplace. Can I offer you coffee? Tea? Coffee would be perfect, thank you. As an aide prepared our drinks, President Hayes settled across from me, her expression growing more serious. I suppose you're wondering why I've asked you here. The truth is, Dr. Leopold, I need your expertise on a matter of national security. The whisper in my mind sharpened with interest. This was what we had been building toward. Access to the ultimate seat of power, the opportunity to influence decisions that would shape the course of nations. I'm at your disposal, Madam President. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, we arrested a domestic terrorist who had been planning an attack on the Capitol building. Marcus Chen, a former software engineer from Silicon Valley. Brilliant mind. No prior criminal history, no obvious radicalization patterns. But when we interrogated him, something unusual happened. Unusual how? He seemed to know things he shouldn't have known. Details about classified operations, names of intelligence assets, information that's compartmentalized at the highest levels. Our experts are baffled. Either we have a massive security breach, or Chen has access to intelligence sources we can't identify. The stone in my briefcase, always present now, always close, pulsed with recognition. Another touched individual. Another person influenced by cosmic forces beyond human understanding. The entity had been busy during my rise to prominence, apparently cultivating multiple assets. Where is Mr. Chen being held? I asked. That's the problem. He's here, Dr. Leopold, in a secure facility beneath the White House. The situation is so sensitive that we can't risk moving him to a conventional prison or psychiatric facility. I need you to evaluate him, to determine if he's genuinely unstable or if something else is going on. I'd be honored to help, Madam President. When can I see him? Immediately, if you're willing. This matter can't wait. 20 minutes later, I found myself descending into depths of the White House I'd never imagined existed. Security levels here made ADX Florence look casual. Biometric scanners, armed guards with automatic weapons, steel doors that required multiple clearances to open. We were so far underground that my ears popped from the pressure change. The holding facility was originally designed during the Cold War, explained Colonel Patricia Vance, the military liaison escorting me. It's been updated since then, but the basic structure remains the same. Completely isolated from outside communication, equipped with every security measure imaginable. The corridor opened into an observation area overlooking a single holding cell. Through reinforced glass, I could see a thin Asian man in an orange jumpsuit, sitting perfectly still on a metal bench. Marcus Chen looked unremarkable. Mid-30s, receding hairline, the soft physique of someone who spent too much time behind a computer. But even through the barrier, I could sense something familiar about him. He's been like that for hours, Colonel Vance noted. Barely moves, barely speaks. When he does talk, it's usually to request meetings with specific government officials by name, officials whose identities are classified. I studied Chen through the glass, and the whisper in my mind began to resonate with a frequency I recognized. I need to speak with him alone. Sir, that's not advisable. Chen has already demonstrated knowledge he shouldn't possess. We can't risk... Colonel, I interrupted, allowing a trace of the entity's influence to color my voice. I've dealt with individuals far more dangerous than Mr. Chen. I need to establish rapport, and that requires privacy. Something shifted in her expression, as if she'd suddenly remembered why I was here. Of course, Dr. Leopold. I'll monitor from the observation deck. The holding cell was even smaller than the interview room at ADX Florence, barely 8 feet square with a metal bench, toilet, and nothing else. Chen looked up as I entered, and I saw immediately that his eyes held the same otherworldly awareness I'd noticed in Doherty. Dr. Sean Leopold, he said before I could introduce myself. I've been expecting you. Have you? I settled onto the bench across from him, studying his expression. Mr. Chen, I'm here to conduct a psychological evaluation. The President is concerned about your mental state. Chen smiled, an expression that seemed too knowing for his unremarkable features. The President is concerned about many things, Doctor. The upcoming elections, the situation in Eastern Europe, the intelligence leaks that seem to be coming from within her own administration. But what really keeps her awake at night is the feeling that events are spiraling beyond her control. How could you possibly know that? The same way you know things, Dr. Leopold. The same way you've been able to peer into the minds of criminals and extract insights that elude other experts. We serve the same master, you and I. The stone in my briefcase pulsed, responding to something in Chen's presence. I could feel the entity's attention focusing through both of us, concentrating cosmic awareness into this small underground space. What do you want? I asked. Nothing for myself, Chen replied. I'm simply here to facilitate the next phase of the plan. You see, Doctor, your rise to prominence was never about personal success. It was about gaining access to this moment, this place, this opportunity. What opportunity? Chen gestured toward the ceiling, indicating the levels above us. The President of the United States is 30 feet away, Dr. Leopold, the most powerful person on Earth, isolated in the most secure building in America. She trusts you, values your expertise, and has specifically requested your help with a matter of national security. Understanding dawned with cold clarity. You want me to influence her. I want you to help her, Chen corrected. President Hayes is facing decisions that will shape the course of human civilization for generations. The entity can provide guidance, show her paths forward that pure human intelligence might miss. Think of it as consulting with a cosmic strategist. And if she refuses? She won't, Chen said with absolute certainty. The entity has been watching her for months, studying her psychological profile, understanding her motivations and fears. It knows exactly how to present itself to gain her cooperation. Through me. Through us. Chen reached into his jumpsuit pocket and withdrew something that made my breath catch. Another stone, identical to mine but pulsing with slightly different rhythms. 2 conduits are better than 1, Doctor. Together, we can offer President Hayes insights that will revolutionize how America approaches global leadership. The whisper in my mind grew stronger, showing me visions of the future. A future where cosmic intelligence guided human policy, where decisions were made with perfect knowledge of their long-term consequences, where the entity's influence shaped civilization's destiny through the most powerful office on Earth. What's the next step? I heard myself asking. You return to the President and deliver your evaluation, Chen explained. Tell her that I'm not mentally ill, that I possess information from sources beyond conventional intelligence gathering. Recommend that she meet with me personally to discuss matters of national security. Once she's in the same room with both of us, the entity can make direct contact. And then, Chen's smile widened. Then President Katherine Hayes becomes the most effective leader in American history, guided by intelligence that spans millennia. The entity doesn't want to control human civilization, Dr. Leopold. It wants to perfect it. I stared at the stone in Chen's hand, feeling the weight of the decision before me. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd compromised, had led to this moment. The entity had kept its promises. I was the most successful forensic psychologist in the world, with access to insights that no purely human intelligence could achieve. But the price was becoming clear. What happens to human free will? I asked. What happens to a child's free will when wise parents provide guidance? Chen countered. The entity doesn't seek to enslave humanity. It seeks to elevate us, to help us avoid the catastrophic mistakes that have plagued our species throughout history. War, environmental destruction, social inequality, all symptoms of limited human perspective. The stone in my briefcase was growing warm, resonating with its twin in Chen's hand. I could feel both entities, or perhaps two aspects of the same entity, reaching toward each other across the small space between us. Dr. Leopold, Chen said softly, you have the opportunity to help guide humanity toward its greatest potential. The President trusts you. She'll listen to your recommendations. Together, we can offer her wisdom that transcends purely human understanding. I thought about President Hayes upstairs, wrestling with decisions that could affect millions of lives. The weight of the office, the isolation of ultimate responsibility, the constant pressure of knowing that every choice carried massive consequences. The entity could lift that burden, provide guidance based on perfect knowledge of cause and effect. All right, I said finally. I'll make the recommendation. Chen nodded with satisfaction. The entity is pleased, Dr. Leopold. You've served its purposes well. 30 minutes later, I was back in the Oval Office, delivering my evaluation to President Hayes. She listened intently as I explained that Marcus Chen possessed information from unconventional sources, that he represented an opportunity rather than a threat, that meeting with him personally might provide insights into intelligence-gathering methods the government hadn't previously considered. You're recommending that I meet with a domestic terrorist, she said slowly. I'm recommending that you meet with someone who has demonstrated access to information he shouldn't possess, I corrected. Understanding how he obtained that information could be crucial to national security. President Hayes was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the rose garden. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of ultimate authority. Very well, Dr. Leopold. Arrange the meeting, but I want you present during the conversation. If Chen is as unusual as you suggest, I'll need your expertise to evaluate whatever he tells me. Of course, Madam President. As I left the Oval Office, the stone in my briefcase pulsed with satisfaction. The entity had achieved its ultimate goal, access to the most powerful person on Earth, mediated through two trusted conduits who could provide the perfect introduction to cosmic consciousness. I walked through the corridors of the West Wing, past portraits of presidents who had shaped American history through purely human wisdom, toward a future where human leadership would be guided by intelligence from beyond the stars. The whisper in my mind grew stronger, showing me glimpses of what was to come. A world where decisions were made with perfect knowledge, where conflicts were resolved before they could escalate, where humanity's potential was finally realized under cosmic guidance. It would be beautiful. Or perhaps that was just what the entity wanted me to believe.
Everybody. Night, guys.
Bye.
All right, you should be good.
Later. Be right back on Call of Duty.